The NHRA rulebook is 412 pages long. It is not long enough. Every season, somewhere in the professional motorcycle drag racing paddock, an engineer identifies something the rules forgot to prohibit. By the time the NHRA writes the amendment closing that gap, the teams have already moved to the next one. This is not accidental. It is the natural result of one enforcement department trying to anticipate the creativity of 40 engineering teams with unlimited motivation and no time horizon. The enforcement department loses. These are 5 documented ways it has lost. Number 1. The tire pressure drop. Lee Shepard transferred this technique from pro-stock cars to pro-stock motorcycles. The physics is not complicated. A drag racing tire generates launch traction through contact patch surface area. Lower tire pressure expands the contact patch. More contact patch means more grip at the hit. The structural risk is real and documented. At 210 miles per hour, a tire running 4 psi below minimum spec has a delamination failure mode that has produced crashes. The surface separates under centrifugal force and heat. At that speed, with your body 18 inches from the ground, the consequences are not theoretical. The NHRA mandated minimum tire pressures and checks them in impound before staging. The burnout solved the enforcement problem for the teams running this technique. During a drag racing burnout, the tire surface exceeds 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Internal air pressure rises 3 to 5 psi from thermal expansion alone. A tire that passes inspection at minimum spec at ambient temperature leaves the burnout box with naturally elevated pressure. As it cools on the approach to the Christmas tree, pressure drops back toward the range the inspector would have flagged. The physics of heat transfer does what the rules cannot prohibit. The minimum pressure mandate became a reference point that the burnout cycle undoes on its own schedule, every single pass. Number 2. The hidden ECU flash. The NHRA permits proprietary engine management software within defined parameter limits. The rules govern what the software may command. What happens between the end of a qualifying pass and the moment the tech inspector's cable connects to the diagnostic port is a harder enforcement problem. A complete ECU reflash takes under 2 minutes, modified ignition timing beyond the legal advance window, rev limiters set above the permitted ceiling, run the modified calibration down the track, roll to tech, reflash to the legal baseline before the connector goes in. The data log records clean software because the log was generated by clean software after the fact. The NHRA countered with mandatory sealed data recorders and time-stamped run logs. Teams adapted with hardware that uses a segregated memory partition. The recorder logs cleanly while the engine runs modified calibration in a section of memory the mandated logger cannot query. The detection infrastructure is 1 generation behind the modification technology. This is a permanent condition. Every time the NHRA closes one version of this technique, the teams are already running the next version. Number 3. The tungsten weight shuffle. Tungsten is 2.5 times denser than steel. A rod about the diameter of your thumb, 6 inches long, weighs roughly 2 pounds. A standard motorcycle racing frame tube holds several of them with no external indication whatsoever. Precisely placed ballast at a location the engineer calculated to optimize weight transfer at launch, in a position the current rulebook does not explicitly prohibit. The NHRA specifies minimum weight and restricts ballast placement to designated mounting locations. Frame tube interiors are not consistently on the restricted list. A team running tungsten inserts arrives at minimum weight with optimized internal distribution. The inspector measures total weight and checks the designated ballast points. The frame tubes stay closed. Nothing on the inspection sheet requires looking inside them.
The advanced application of this technique uses a quick release mechanism inside the tube. The configuration rolling through impound inspection is not the configuration that goes to the starting line. Number 4. The wheelie bar geometry cheat. Wheelie bars are standard equipment in most professional motorcycle drag classes. They prevent excessive front wheel lift at launch and are regulated for both length and pivot angle. Both measurements are taken during tech inspection before the bike enters the stage area. A telescoping inner assembly, 3 degrees of pivot angle change at the ground contact point, produces a measurable front-end stability improvement at launch that compounds with the tire pressure and weight distribution techniques across the full elapsed time. The spring-loaded mechanism retracts to legal dimensions before the bike returns through impound. Precision machining required. Willingness to accept full teardown consequences required. Multiple paddock sources describe this as an active technique at the professional level. There is no confirmed catch at Pro Stock Motorcycle on record. Number 5. The Nitrous Frame Tube. Every mechanic in professional motorcycle drag racing knows this one. Every NHRA technical official working the professional paddock knows this one. Neither group discusses it directly in public. The chromoly steel frame tube is hollow. The inside holds a cylindrical canister. The canister connects to a micro solenoid on the handlebar that is indistinguishable from any other standard control in visual inspection. The nitrous fires for 0.3 of a second at the launch point. The combustion products exit the exhaust. The finish line emission sniffer tests air that left the cylinder 8 seconds and 200 feet earlier. On the car side of Pro Stock, the 1997 Columbus explosion confirmed that hidden nitrous delivery systems had reached professional drag racing. Teams in the car class had hidden bottles inside oil coolers, inside ballast cavities, inside any accessible space large enough to hold a canister. The motorcycle class has smaller spaces. The frame tube is the most accessible one. It does not require an oil cooler. It does not require a separate compartment. It is already there. The frame tube requires pulling the engine and disassembling the chassis to access. That procedure is not on the standard post-run inspection checklist. The common thread across all 5 techniques is one principle. The rulebook defines what you cannot do. It cannot define what it has not yet imagined. The gap between those 2 things is where the championships that do not make the history books get built. Professional drag racing is an engineering sport masquerading as an athletic one. The rider matters, the reaction time matters, but at the highest levels, the difference between winning and losing is mostly decided in workshops before the truck ever leaves for the track. The teams that win consistently are not always the ones with the best riders. They're the teams with the best engineers and the longest memory for where the rulebook has gaps. The NHRA rulebook will keep getting longer. It always does. 412 pages today, more next season. The frame tube will stay hollow until somebody gets caught with something inside it. And somewhere in the paddock right now, somebody already knows what is in it.